Jake had been a security technician for over 10 years, and he had seen almost everything. Broken alarms, faulty cameras, doors that wouldn't close properly. Nothing had ever surprised him. That's why when the call came from a small, isolated house at the edge of town, he thought it was just another routine job. The kind of job he could finish in an hour and be home for dinner. The house was old, almost hidden behind overgrown trees, with a narrow driveway that seemed to swallow his truck. As Jake stepped out, the wind rustled through the branches, but he shrugged it off. Old house, old wiring, he muttered to himself. He had done this kind of inspection hundreds of times before. The sun was just beginning to set, casting long shadows across the cracked driveway. But he didn't think much of it. Inside, the house smelled of dust and mildew. The floorboards creaked under his boots, and the lights flickered slightly as he moved from room to room. Jake was methodical, checking the cameras, testing the alarm, making notes in his tablet. Everything seemed normal, and he felt confident he would finish quickly. Then he heard it. The front door clicked behind him. He turned, thinking it was the wind, but the door was now firmly shut. He tugged at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Strange, he said out loud, trying to laugh it off, but a shiver ran down his spine. He was a trained professional. Doors didn't scare him. He went back to his tablet to finish logging the system. That's when the phone on the kitchen counter rang. He picked it up. A calm, soft voice whispered, "Stay inside. Don't try to leave." The line went dead before he could respond. Jake frowned, his instincts telling him something was off. He tried the door again, but it remained locked. Every window in the house was shut tight. Even the back door had latched itself, as if someone had been watching him. Jake's heart began to beat faster, but he forced himself to think clearly. Maybe it was a glitch in the smart lock system. He checked the tablet again. Nothing unusual. Every system reported all secure. And yet, every exit was blocked. He felt the old fear that he never thought would reach him. He moved through the house, testing every lock and door, trying to find a way out. The lights flickered again, and the sound of soft footsteps echoed somewhere upstairs. Jake froze. He was alone, or at least he thought he was. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a faint whispering, almost like someone was speaking from the walls themselves. "Don't leave. Stay." Jake tried to call for help, but his phone had no signal. The house was cutting him off from the outside world completely. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to run. He checked the windows again, but each one seemed reinforced. Even the smallest cracks in the glass were sealed. He remembered the voice on the phone and tried to calm himself. Maybe this was some kind of prank, a test set up by the homeowners. He decided to look for the source of the strange sounds. Upstairs, he found a small attic door, slightly ajar. The whispering grew louder as he approached. He pushed it open and found nothing. Just an empty, dusty room filled with old furniture and cobwebs. As he turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind him, and the lights went out completely. Jake's breathing became shallow as darkness swallowed the room. He fumbled for his flashlight, clicking it on just in time to see shadows moving along the walls. They seemed to stretch and twist, following him. He backed toward the door, but it wouldn't open. Then he heard it clearly, a voice, calm and cold, right next to his ear. "You should never have come here." He spun around, but no one was there. The shadows flickered like flames, and he realized they were not shadows at all, but shapes. Figures with no faces, standing silently, watching. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to think. He remembered the fire escape in the kitchen, a small hatch above the sink. Maybe it would work. He ran back, climbed the counter, and pulled it open. Light from outside poured in, but as he reached for the roof, the hatch slammed itself shut. A whisper echoed around him. No one leaves. Not tonight. Hours seemed to pass. Jake tried every door, every window, every system, but the house refused to release him. Then, just as he began to lose hope, the sun rose. The figures faded, the doors unlocked themselves, and the whispering stopped. It was silent again, the house looking just like an ordinary old home. Jake ran from the house, never looking back. He never got an explanation, never returned for the job, and never told anyone exactly what happened. But he knew one thing. Some places are not just buildings, and some calls are not routine. Even now, he hears a soft whisper whenever he passes that street, reminding him of the night he thought it was a normal job, until the house locked itself. It was supposed to be a fun weekend trip, just me and my two friends, out in the middle of the forest, far from any city lights. We had set up our tents near a small clearing, close to a creek, where the sound of running water was calming. The first night had been peaceful. We laughed, told stories, and roasted marshmallows over the fire. Everything felt safe. But that peace didn't last. Around midnight, as I was lying in my sleeping bag, I thought I heard something strange. At first, I convinced myself it was an animal, a raccoon, or maybe a deer, moving through the underbrush. But then I heard it again, a slow, deliberate step, and then another, then another. It wasn't close yet, but it was definitely near. I froze. My friends were asleep, unaware of what was happening. The steps seemed to be circling our tent. They weren't random, like an animal exploring. These steps were careful, almost measured. I could hear them move closer, then farther, as if someone or something was walking around us in the dark. I nudged my friend, trying to keep my voice down. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She murmured something, half asleep, and rolled over. I realized I was on my own in noticing this. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was the wind, or the branches scraping together. But then I heard it again, right outside the tent. This time, it sounded like something pacing slowly, circling the whole camp. I could hear a crunch of leaves, the faintest snap of a twig. It was there. I was sure of it. I wanted to leave the tent, to check outside with my flashlight. But my mind screamed no. The forest was dark, and whatever it was, I couldn't see it. I thought about shouting, but what if it heard me? What if it was human? Or worse, something else? I stayed still, trying to breathe quietly, listening as the footsteps moved around us in the pitch-black night. Minutes felt like hours. Every now and then, the steps would pause. I held my breath each time. Then, just as I thought it had gone, they would start again, circling closer, getting louder, almost as if it wanted to be noticed. I couldn't tell if it was watching us, or just playing some cruel game. I could feel the sweat on my forehead, my fingers shaking, and I knew my friends had no idea what was happening. I remembered the stories of people disappearing in these woods. I remembered warnings online, things people claimed about strange figures that wander at night, watching campers. I told myself those were just stories, but the sound of the steps was real. Too real. I gripped the tent poles, wishing I had something to defend myself. I didn't dare move. I didn't dare speak. Hours passed. The fire we had made earlier had burned out, and the cold started creeping in. The steps continued, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always circling, always just out of sight. I couldn't make sense of it. No one came. No animal attacked. Yet the fear was worse than anything I had felt before. I wanted the sun to rise so badly. I wanted the first light to banish whatever was out there. Finally, just before sunrise, the footsteps stopped. Everything went silent. I stayed frozen, not daring to move, not daring to breathe too loudly. Then I heard a bird sing, then another. The forest slowly came alive with the sounds of morning. The terror of the night didn't vanish, but at least it felt like it had retreated with the darkness. When we finally unzipped the tent, my friends were groggy, asking why I hadn't woken them. I didn't want to tell them. They wouldn't believe me, I thought. Outside, there were no footprints, no signs of anyone, no traces of what had been circling us all night. Just the normal forest floor, calm and quiet. Yet, I knew what I had heard. I had felt it. And I knew that night something had been there with us, circling our tent, waiting until the sun came up. Even now, I can't forget it. Sometimes, when I camp, I feel it again, the feeling of eyes on me, footsteps moving silently just beyond the light of the fire. I don't know what it was, and maybe I never will. But that night in the forest, there was something real out there, circling, patient, watching, and I don't think it will ever leave my memory. The old building at the edge of town had been empty for years, its walls cracked, windows broken, and doors hanging off their hinges. Everyone in the neighborhood said it was haunted, but no one went inside anymore. One day, the city decided it was time to tear it down. Heavy machinery arrived, and workers started preparing the site. Late that night, a patrol car was driving past the building. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet. Suddenly, the officer in the car froze. He heard a faint sound, like someone crying. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the crying grew louder, desperate, and unmistakable. Curious and worried, the officer got out of the car and walked toward the building. The crying seemed to come from inside. The old wooden door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was cold and damp. Dust floated in the dim light of his flashlight. Each step echoed through the empty hallways. "Hello?" he called, his voice shaking a little. The crying stopped for a moment, then started again, louder than before. It sounded like a child. His heart raced. No one should be here. The building had been empty for years. He followed the sound upstairs. The stairs groaned under his weight. In one of the rooms, he saw a small figure huddled in a corner, rocking back and forth. It was a little girl, no older than 8. Her clothes were dirty, her hair tangled, and tears streamed down her face. "Are you okay?" the officer asked, gently. The girl didn't respond at first, just continued crying. Then she whispered, "I'm scared. I don't want to leave." Her voice was soft, but full of fear. The officer quickly realized she must have been hiding here for a long time. But how? Who had left her? And why? He radioed for backup and tried to calm her. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here," he said. As he waited for help, he noticed strange things in the room. Old furniture covered in dust, broken toys, scraps of paper with childish drawings, and tiny footprints leading from the back of a building. It looked like someone had been living here in secret for weeks, maybe even months. Finally, more officers arrived. They took the girl into their care and called social services. She clung to the first officer, afraid to let go. He promised her she would be safe and that no one would hurt her again. The next morning, the building was swarming with police and reporters. Everyone wanted to know how a child could survive alone in a building marked for demolition. Investigators searched every corner, looking for clues, but the girl couldn't or wouldn't say who left her there. She only whispered, "I was alone until you came." The city eventually tore down the building, but people in the neighborhood never forgot the crying they had heard that night. The little girl, now safe with a foster family, sometimes asked if the building would be there tomorrow. She had no memory of how she got there, only the fear and the sound of the wind echoing through the empty halls. Even now, police officers who were on that night say they can still hear the faint sound of crying when they drive past the empty lot. Some say it's just memories playing tricks. Others wonder if some part of the little girl's fear still lingers in the shadows.
If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories of real-life darkness. Your support helps us keep telling the stories many prefer to keep silent.